Hey, everybody, welcome to the Mind Muscle Connection. I'm Joe Klimzeski with Tyler Weeb. Today, we're going to talk about binary thinking. And I'm sure if you went back through our previous episodes, this topic or this phrase has had to have come up at some point. But in a very specialized way, I think it's important to pick this apart. And I had the perfect example happen yesterday, Tyler, in that a young college student came up to me, knew who I was, knew what I did, and wanted to talk about nutrition. And as often college students are, this young lady who was learning about nutrition and physiology, and she had her own experiences. So she had this very dogmatic thought process. Like she knew this is how nutrition works. And in her framing, a particular type of nutrition philosophy, even just intentional weight loss in general, bad, shouldn't do it. Here's why. And I said, okay, hang on a second. I love helping young people. I love talking to college students, but sit down for a second, because this is my world. This is what I do. This is what I've done for 30 years. So I need you to now listen to me for a couple of minutes. And I said, okay, this is your framing. This is right and this is wrong. Binary thinking. You are a 20-some-year-old college student in a Midwest town. Is it right for an 80-year-old? Is it right for a 20-ish-year-old in Ethiopia? Was it right for somebody 50 years ago? Is it right for somebody who has a different set of experiences than you? Is it right for somebody who has a different goal than you? And I just kept going and piling on. And you just saw her kind of shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. And I said, here's the lesson. Anytime you think you have something figured out, it's because you do have this binary thought. I have the answer. And our brains are wired to do that. We want to know what's right and wrong. We want to know what's a threat and not a threat. But man, that is a tough place to be, because you're going to back yourself into a corner. And now everybody who doesn't think like you is going to be anti you. And you're probably wrong for most people in most contexts. You are right for you right now. That is the definition of binary thinking. And I think we all go through that. That's part of that, what's classically called adolescent narcissism. And I think it takes a few punches to the face, like I softly provided, to kind of learn that lesson.
Yeah. That's probably a whole other topic, is how do we present, complex thinking? We got to do it softly, but yeah, I mean, you think about it in this way. Like, what's like one of the biggest questions that we as humans ask ourselves? Why are we here? Like, we have to have this cut and dry answer of this big complex issue of why are we even here? We have whole religions built off of this. We have whole societies built off of this. And so that binary thinking, like you said, is so hardwired into us. And I kind of like how you started to talk about how, is this right for this person? And is this right for this person? Because I did have in my notes, it's very hard for us, I mean, myself included, to fully understand that each human being that we come into contact with is having the exact same experience that we are, that same human experience. They are feeling the same emotions that we do at the same level. They believe in the certain things that, we may believe in complete opposite things, but guess what? They believe in it just as much as you do, even though they're the complete opposite. And so that, I think, is very hard for us to be able to fathom, because you start going, well, now there's 7 billion people on this planet. And now to think in that sense of we are all having the same experience can be very overwhelming. It can be very scary. And what do we talk about, all of this time when things get scary? We retreat into what we know. We retreat into what is comfortable, into our own little worldview. We seek out people that look at our, have the same worldview as ours. We seek out research that has the, confirmation bias. We want to know that we are right. We want to know that we have it all figured out, when, like you said, I mean, is it right for that, person in Ethiopia? Is it right for this person? And we have to understand that just because, for example, this nutrition, just because it worked for her doesn't mean that it's going to work for that other person, because that person is coming with a whole different set of life experience, where maybe that nutrition protocol, that could maybe trigger them to binging, or that could trigger them into a spiral of anorexia, or, what have you. And so we have to be able to, take, I've always, these principles that we know of nutrition, right? We have this umbrella, and there's certain principles. Yes, you have to have enough protein, fats are good, etc. But once we start getting under that umbrella, it starts to branch out into, putting it towards that individual and their own life experiences, and not having this binary thinking of going, well, no, you have to do it this way because it worked for this person, or this, it worked for me. That might be the complete opposite of what they need.
It was probably almost 10 years ago, I decided to take a turn, maybe not quite 10 years ago. When I went into a master's degree for writing, I went in to learn fiction. That was going to be my primary genre. I thought, just as a hobby into retirement. And I just ended up in my very first semester being swept back into nonfiction because of some very, very great professors in narrative nonfiction and so forth. And I ended up delving deeply into developmental psychology and personality psychology, which led to, a lot of things you and I have shared together, neuropsychology. And in all of those models of thinking, because you use the phrase complex thinking, which I love. If anybody takes anything away from today, just think of that phrase, complex thinking. That's the antithesis of binary thinking. There are different levels, different dimensionalities. But I started down this path of looking at belief, like what makes people believe what they believe. You said it so perfectly that even if somebody believes the exact opposite of you, through evidential process that what they believe is totally, totally wrong, they still believe it with everything in them. They would die for that personal and unverified truth. And so now, flash forward, we're in 2022. Look at the last 5 or 6 years we've been through. Every other book on the market is about truth and what's, quote, alternative fact. What's anything anymore? Everybody's questioning that because simply anybody can believe anything. And down this rabbit hole of the different branches of psychology, I got to a place that I didn't even know existed, and it's called persuasion psychology. There's an entire branch of psychology just to look at how we dupe each other, how we lie to each other, how we con each other, how we try and make people believe what we believe so it makes us feel better about our beliefs, all these things. And it's very oddly almost like a business sales like 101 kind of thing, except you really see how people are so prone to that path, and it comes from these binary triggers. So if I can just attach something to a value, you and I share a value, and I can say, oh, this is what we believe to be true, that person doesn't. That person is now stupid. That person is now an other. That person isn't the same as us. They're second class to us. And we will go layer upon layer upon layer just to insulate ourselves into these binaries. And we had a conversation a couple of weeks ago about truth. This is very related to that. But I think people have to come back to what you said first. Am I thinking complexly enough? If I have something that I think is really emotional to me, I'm passionate about it, I'm excited about it, it seems like there's resistance to it, and I have allies in it, like it's a thing, maybe I need to be worried about that. Maybe if there's so much animosity there and passion, maybe I need to think a little bit more complexly, because big, hard topics often don't have a right answer. I mean, think about, COVID and vaccines and so forth, like how much angst there is. And every time I get two people together who don't believe the same things, and I just start with the biology and I start kind of decompressing some of those emotions, everybody walks away saying, yeah, I get it now. I totally get it. And they may change their minds. I've had people with Instagram and Facebook posts tell me like, wow, I'm going to go to get the vaccine after reading your post, or you've changed my mind, or you've opened this up. And it's because of what you said, Tyler. It's because they just stepped back and they said, maybe I need to open my brain up to a higher level of complexity.
Yeah, I mean, it forces us to not be reactionary, and we actually have to sit down and think, which isn't an easy thing to do. Like, let's be honest, like it's not an easy thing. It's not maybe a very fun thing. I mean, look at the rise in just people utilizing, self-care and self-help through, therapists. And don't get me wrong, I love therapy. Like I'm a big advocate for therapy, but a lot of people don't like to be in their own minds, and it can be a very scary place for a lot of people. And so, you take into the fact that just as, mammals and animal, we're already emotionally reactionary for the most part. We like to have our tribe, right? It's always us versus them. I mean, that's how we basically evolved as a human species. We outlived all the other types of, humanoid species. And once we get comfortable, it's very hard to get outside of that comfort zone because of just that potential inability to sit down and think complexly. Again, this could probably be another podcast. What does that say about our society and how we are bringing up kids? And, let's just memorize facts and then go from there, right? Get it all down and away you go. But yeah, just to be able to have that I don't want to say non-emotional, because I think emotion is always a good thing to have in a conversation. Like that creates who we are, like, as human beings. But it's about being able to look past that emotion of that, like, instant anger of, oh, this person disagrees with me, I automatically hate them, and I'm automatically going to shut down. I'll listen to them, quote unquote, but you're not actually listening, right? You're just have your next challenge ready to their viewpoint. You're already kind of coming up instead of actually hearing them and listening to them and trying to understand where they are coming from within their human experience and their viewpoint on this. And then that's, now you get two people doing the exact same thing. And well, what do you have? You get the US government just yelling and fighting with each other and everyone else.
You gave the exact definition of emotional intelligence, which is it's okay to have passion. It's okay to have emotion, but you have to regulate it. You have to control it. And my question to our audience, think of, you're in this space where you're probably consuming a lot of nutrition and training information, maybe, performance or physique sport information. Think of the influencers that you like. Think of the people that you like to listen to, and truly make a list. And I want you to consider, as they articulate their points and they have conversations that may include debate. I've seen some podcasts now where people are getting together with opposing viewpoints on certain topics like training to failure and that kind of thing. And you have people out there who are not controlling their emotions well. They have very low emotional intelligence. So they're angry, they're bomb throwers, they're insulting people. And then you have other people who can completely disagree, articulate their position, tell you why, and then they're okay. They don't need to convince you. They don't need to one up you in front of the audience. They're like, I presented my information, that's cool. If nobody wants to believe it, that's fine. And they're good. They walk away. Like, their heart rate never even goes above baseline. And then there are other people that are so just full of emotion in a rageful way. And to my listeners and audience here with you, Tyler, I would just say, who do you want to be? In your life of following certain people and being a leader yourself, perhaps, where do you want to fall on that spectrum? You want to be somebody who can take information from all kinds of different angles and say, okay, based on maybe further information, I'll make an opinion. Maybe I'll never know the answer, but this seems to work well for these reasons. And we can all do that and still be very civil and polite. And coming back to what you said, it's okay to not have to make a binary conclusive decision right now. You can say, with the evidence that I've seen so far and the people I'm listening to, I'm going to go with this, but I still have an open mind that someday it may change. Maybe more evidence, maybe more insight, maybe more experience will change my mind, but I'm okay putting all my eggs in this basket for right now. But I don't have to die on that hill. I don't have to go out and feel like I have to defend it and fight with people about it every day.
It's okay to change your mind, right? Like, and I think we've gotten to this point where it's like, if someone changes their mind, it's like, oh, look, like they were wrong, or, why should we listen to them? And if anything, I mean, granted, there may be certain people you want to be careful of and in certain contexts, but for the most part, if you've got someone who is actively changing their mind when they are presented with new evidence, that's probably someone you want to listen to, because they are getting out of that binary thinking. They are willing to have that open mind of, oh, okay, maybe I didn't know, this, or maybe I didn't know as much as I thought I did, or, oh, wow, the evidence completely, shows something different. Right. And so you do have to be open, for that type of life experience of being changed. I mean, that's how we evolve. That's how we grow as a, better human being. And, when it comes to, nutrition and fitness and something, all that kind of stuff, I think a very important thing for our listeners to remember when they're kind of going through information is, if you've got someone saying, I know this is the way, or this is the only way, or this is the absolute truth for, fat loss or building muscle or etc., probably time to steer away from that person. Okay. I know you and I, like, we've had a great opportunity to, work and talk with people like Eric Helms, Lane Norton, Paul Revelia, like all of these, titans of the industry. And I think one of the most common things that you are going to see is it depends, right? What is the context of that person's goal, of that person's life, of that person's experience? Like, again, I come back to that umbrella. We have these general principles that for the most part we know work, but then it's context and we get into those layers, and it's really about being flexible. And I think you said it a little bit earlier, is finding the right equation that is going to work for that person, that is going to allow them to reach their goals in the best way possible for that person.
I have a funny story. I talked to a friend of mine who's a great entrepreneur, totally different space, but young guy, best-selling author. Like he's a big deal. And we're really good friends, known each other for a long time. And he sent me this article that he was very proud of. And it was on a topic that is in my wheelhouse. So, all of my education, not his. And like I said, he wanted my approval. He's here, Joe, this is what I did. I'm really proud of it. And I said, well, it's really, really good writing, but I disagree with every single point you made. And so I did that intentionally as a joke to kind of be an affront. But here's how he responded. He sent me back a link to schedule with his podcast. And he said, okay, we'll discuss it tomorrow on this podcast. And so I think that's funny, because it's two friends just, kind of, bumping chests. But he also wants to pick it apart. It's like, okay, if you have an assertion to make, let's talk this through and see. Because I think part of his response is because he really does trust me. And he thinks, okay, if I believe these things, first of all, I think Joe's probably full of shit. But, maybe I actually do have something to learn, and I'm really looking for this conversation. I'm going to get it on tape. Like I want this. If it's going to go down, I want this to have some value. So he's thinking multi-dimensionally, complex thinking as well. But, he could have just said, screw you. Who cares? I don't care what you think, but again, he wants to dive in and see what I mean. And I think that's a very mature thing to do.
Hey, opportunity to dunk on Dr. Joe. I mean, let's go. Let's go. I'll pay for the flight out there, whatever it needs. No. But I think it's thinking complexly. Like, it's a skill too, right? And it kind of comes back to what I was saying. Like, it's not an easy thing to do, because it does require us to, I think, know ourselves, quite intimately, and to be able to sit down and, shift through your biases and your own experience through life, and, how your experience has shaped your life. That's a skill. Like that is very, very much a skill. When we talk about, neurobiology and our grooves, and how, we start to think one way, that groove gets deeper and deeper and deeper. So we're actively talking about, trying to create like neural changes within our brain to start thinking differently. And just like any skill in life, like if you're starting a new skill, you're going to suck at it at first, and it's not going to be a lot of fun. And I just think that's a natural disposition for a lot of people, is to not really gravitate towards new skills, because no one wants to suck at something, right? But we often forget we have to suck at something first before we become something, pretty great.
Yep. And I'm gonna wrap up the session just by putting a bow on what you said there. My very first social psychology professor at Harvard, in the very first class, she gave me an axiom that will stick with me the rest of my life. She said, the brain, where this is the premise is social psychology, so how we interact with each other, is just your brain is like a 4-year-old with a label machine, like a label gun. And every bit of stimuli going into your brain's first thing is to label it, good, bad, good, bad, good, bad, threat, non-threat. And that's just the first layer. Now you have to decide what you're going to do with that. How you function internally and socially is going to depend on what you do with those. And this is where the complexity comes in. So you as always framed it beautifully, Tyler. We'll leave it there. We're going to come back to you guys in the Mind Muscle Connection next week with another great topic, hopefully to help you with your training, your nutrition, make sure that your lives in general are just more enriched. We hope you can think a little bit deeper because of this, and just have a better social integration with everything we do. To me, that's incredibly important. That's why I love, Tyler, the fact that we call this the mind muscle connection, connecting ourselves to our bodies, connecting ourselves to each other. But again, thank you. And we will see you guys next time in the Mind Muscle Connection.